We're back. All right.
Lucky.
Sorry,
The rock world wants to hear more about why every symbol on Earth is a rock symbol.
So this is why I have other people schedule the Zoom meetings because inevitably when I book one, when I create it, something goes haywire. So I'm like, somebody else must know how to do this better than I do because I'm old. I grew up with a black rotary phone on the kitchen wall.
Hmm.
No VCRs, no cable television. It was super analog growing up.
Friends knocking the front door when it's daily, right?
Yeah. Or you get on your bike and you'd go find your friends. And when you saw all the other bikes, that's where everybody was.
Exactly.
So when we get back to, those early rock bands that started to play, they had to use the symbols that were readily available because Zildjian just made cymbals. They made paper thins, and they made thins, and they made heavies, and they made bands. And there were no model names, really.
Mhm.
You would just go and find what worked.
So band is heavier than heavy? Band, you said band symbols?
Band would be like, orchestral symbols.
And heavier than the heavy. So what's the range of
It depends. They could be one, they could be interchangeable.
Oh, I see, I see.
But when cymbals were being made at the Zildjian plant in Quincy, Mass, there was no, this one's going to be, a light ride and a medium ride and something else. They just made different thicknesses.
Mhm.
And when the orders would come in, and Armin Zildjian's the one that developed the cymbal testing position. They would see the order from the music stores or the drum stores, and it would say, we want this, and then the cymbal tester would go to the shelf and find it.
Mhm.
Yep.
So would you say nowadays, with all these rock symbols being produced, that the rock symbols are sort of based off what rock drummers of the past did now? This sort of help to.
Well, let me give you a little bit more history, and then we'll get into the design of a rock cymbal. So, as rock music continued to develop, and the guitar players would have more Marshall amps on stage, the drummers needed to have cymbals that would be able to cut through that volume on the stage. And the miking techniques back in the 50s, 60s, early 70s weren't as sophisticated as they are now. And there was a couple things that Zildjian could do. And they could add weight to the cymbal. They could increase the curvature. And you put a bigger bell in so it would cut through the Marshall stacks. So those cymbals are generally heavier and have a larger bell in them. So they would project. So you could hear them within the context of the music and the amplified instruments. Now, I don't know, are you a fan of Rush at all? Of course, you know who Neil Peart is. Everybody knows who Neil Peart is. So if you look at his early Zildjian setup, and even with the Sabian setup, the Paragon cymbals, you'll see that the 16-inch crash, everybody thought it was maybe like a medium thin crash, but it wasn't. It was a rock crash. And when you hear it within the music, it sounds like a very pretty thin cymbal. But what you're hearing is the once he hits the cymbal, you hear the initial attack of the cymbal and not the lingering sustain. So it sounds very pretty. It goes, so if you listen to any of the recordings, but he's using a rock crash, and he's using that so it can cut through all the music that's on stage, and all you hear is the initial stick strike against the metal. But if you played a 16-inch rock crash by itself in a store, you would say to yourself, and I say it, and I'm a cymbal maker, it's very, very clangy and noisy, but within the right context of the music, it sounds very, very pretty. So,
I think it's definitely right with the right music context. Say because Stuart Copeland uses very tight, like loads of splashes, like an inch hi-hat. Not very. I mean, has like two cymbals on the side. I think. I think it's really depends on the context of what he's playing.
You also want to make sure that you're, like I said earlier, you don't want to play a cymbal that's not designed for the style of music. So you don't want to play a 16-inch thin crash and thrash metal music. Because what you're going to do is you're going to overplay that piece of metal. It's going to fail, which means it's going to break. So one of two things is going to happen. Either the drumstick's going to break or the cymbal's going to break. So you'll see rock drummers, and not so much now. A lot of this might be contradictory now because of the miking situations, but in the trends in music. But you want to go to bigger cymbals with a larger bell. So they don't have to be super heavy, but you want to have enough mass there so it'll project and sustain. Because if you overplay the cymbal, you're asking it to do something it wasn't designed to do, and it will give up on you.
I think that's what happened with one of my cymbals.
Which one?
The Zildjian Z. I'll actually go get it and I'll show you what happened with it.
Hello, Leslie. We're in conversation with Paul Francis. You might know. Liz is a percussionist.
Oh, hello.
From say hello. He's one of the main cymbal makers of Zildjian back in the day, and Max is having a project.
Right.
And we're trying to squeeze out as much as we can from his wisdom.
Fantastic.
And practice.
Did you work with anybody from Zildjian in the UK?
No.
Oh, sorry.
No. This is Liz. Liz?
Yes,
Liz,
Liz.
is that-
She's my colleague.
Did she work with anybody from Zildjian in the UK office?
No, I'm a percussionist, orchestral percussionist.
Okay. And where do you play?
Not very much anymore, but I used to play locally around the southwest.
Okay.
And so on.
Yeah, I know Neil Percy.
I know.
He's with London Philharmonic.
Okay.
Yeah, Royal Academy of Music, stuff like that. So
Good.
yeah. Well, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
All right.
Bye.
But yeah, so this is of my own doing. Probably not the best way to repair it, if I'm honest. I was pretty young when I did this. But basically what happened, because I kept using this as a, I think I just kept hitting it in the wrong thing, and then the cut started to go further down, so that's why I cut around it.
Yeah, make sure they're nice and round.
Yeah.
Where no sharp points. So when it cracked and you kept playing it, it continued to crack. Do you want to know why? Because now it was vibrating out of phase.
Oh, was it?
Because it wasn't one piece of metal anymore.
Right.
Yeah. So that's why drummers drill out they try to find the end of the crack and drill it out, or they cut it out. I bet you that sounds pretty cool now with that big chunk taken out of it. You still use it?
Sometimes. I don't really use it as often because I feel like, I feel like it affected the sound in a way that maybe I don't realize. But I think that's one thing. When you're repairing a cymbal, it's going to sound different. Maybe in a good way or bad way. So maybe it's good to look at repaired cymbals and then maybe go from there. Maybe experimental ones like that.
So just in general terms, back to rock cymbals. So a rock ride's going to have a nice large bell in it.
Yeah.
So you have a lot more volume. So when you're keeping time, you can hear the time. And if you need to go to the bell, it's very, very prominent. Rock crashes are generally a little bit heavier. So when you hit them, they'll resonate for a very, very long time. But you can also use thinner cymbals. You can use medium thins, and dare I say thin cymbals, as long as they're larger in diameter, 19, 20, 21, with a big bell. And they'll work very, very well. Like the Zildjian Sweet Ride, the 21-inch Sweet Ride. That's a really, really nice cymbal, and it's a medium thin weight. It's not a heavy weight, and you can use that as a crash ride. I made some 21s and 22s for Zach Starkey, who plays with the Who.
Oh yeah. Oh cool.
Yep. And he's Ringo Starr's son. I made some very, very large cymbals for him, so he could crash ride them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he could get a big wall of sound, and that they would hang out and not break.
Okay. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I was going to say about the using heavier cymbals on rock, because I have like thin cymbals that tend to do the right, seem to cut through as just as well as heavier. So I'm guessing
Mhm.
I'm guessing it depends on the context of the music again, whatever works best.
If you're on stage and you're playing a festival,
Yeah,
the sound goes away from you.
yeah,
But when you're playing in a room with other musicians and there's some walls and you get some feedback from the noise
yeah,
or the music bouncing off the walls, you don't need to have bigger cymbals with bigger bells and stuff
yeah.
in them. So it all depends. You have to have the right tools for the right job.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
part of my experiment is actually gathering these symbols once I know like where to look with this research, and I'm thinking if there like a symbol combination where I should follow like a same building technique or path, or if they're like throw whatever together and see if it can work like that.
You want to get the same diameters to compare.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep, apples to apples. So that way you can hear the progression in the sound and the design. So if you think about 16-inch crash cymbals, let's say, right? So you have a thin, a medium thin, and a medium. They'll all have a smaller bell, like a hi-hat bell in them. The only difference in the three of those is weight.
Right. Okay.
And then you get into the rock crash 16 that has a larger bell. Just because if you added more weight to the medium crash, you won't get the sustain that you're looking for. So you don't want to compare a 16 to a 19 to a 23. That it's like saying, okay, well, I'm going to eat this apple and this orange and say, I'm going to tell you how similarly they taste, and they won't.
Right.
So if you're going to compare, the progression of sound from a paper thin crash all the way to a rock crash, you want to do it with the same diameter.
Okay. Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yep.
Do you think there is, are you aware of any analysis procedures to quantify the comparison? Or is it just, oh, well, this one sounds like this, and this one is a bit muddy, and this one isn't?
As far as the progression of design within a series of
the actual timbre, right? Because I mean, we've been talking with Dave about this. I tend to think that you would get kind of a tractor type chaotic motion in the spectrum as the thing decays. Obviously, you can get sometimes these low frequency undulations, and then the whole thing, is it now a wash? Is it noisy spectrum? Is it composed of multiple very disharmonious components? What's the actual timbre? How? Because we talk with metaphors, obviously, and it's really interesting to know what other metaphors you think are useful for rock music, because so far we've had volume and piercing cutting through.
You want it to be clean.
Clean.
Okay, so let's talk about azulgin, kazulgin. Kazulgin, people tend to use the terms that it's dark and dirty and funky and complex. Azulgin is bright and pretty and clean. 2002s are bright, pretty, and clean. So when you're playing rock music, you don't want darker sounding cymbals because it's going to sit in a frequency range that's with other instrumentations, which is good, but you don't want those other instrumentations to mask it. Because you're using the cymbals to accentuate the music. It's the exclamation points, it's the commas, it's the pauses, it's the within the conversation. So if you're speaking specifically rock cymbals, you want some stuff that you're going to be able to hear and that's going to cut through the music and live within the music. They're generally pretty cymbals. They're brighter cymbals. And that's part of the design, because a heavier cymbal than a lighter one in the same diameter is always brighter. All right? But, here, I'm just going to blow your mind with this one. A 6-inch splash that weighs 3.5 ounces is always brighter than a 24-inch heavy ride that weighs 8 pounds.
Yeah.
Always. It's physics.
Yeah. But would you also add in the amount of hammering into the cleanness equation, one way or the other?
The hammering's a means to an end to get the cymbal to a curvature, so we'll get to the sound that you want. So I don't count hammer marks. I put in the curvature. So if I
And
want
in terms of
to,
the curvature, which one is cleaner, the umbrella or the flatter? Flatter is cleaner, I would think.
well, it depends. I mean, if you put in hammer rows, you'll get more even vibrations across the body because there's less speed bumps there. And if you put hammer marks all over the place, you've compressed the metal in certain areas and made that area stronger than, another area that has no hammering in it. So it just has different vibrational properties. A lower curvature is going to have a slower wavelength than a higher curvature. Yep. So think of cymbals like a spring. So if you have a really, really tightly wound spring, you have a higher curvature cymbal.
I see.
So if you're going to do mallet rolls, if you're playing the orchestra and you want to suspend it, you want a flatter curvature.
Of course, yeah.
And if you want a nice cutting crash cymbal through rock music, you want something with a higher curvature. It's a little bit heavier, brighter, prettier, cleaner.
So you would say
also,
that
Yeah.
Go ahead, ask your question.
the more symmetrical, more regular hammer marks would yield a cleaner cymbal. Am I getting this right?
In general, yeah, there's always going to be contradictions. These are all general rules. Can I make a random hammered cymbal that sounds bright and pretty? Of course I can. But that's not usually the approach that I take. I'll put in hammer rows to make something that just sounds clean and pretty. Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, yeah. So sort of more of the cleaner versus a dry.
Do we have more attributes? So we've talked about cleanliness, about piercing through, about volume. I mean, I'm always thinking, well, a ballad is also rock, but it's just a different thing in terms of symbols it needs. Would you add that as a special case?
Say that again?
A ballad, like a slow tune in rock music. Would that require a different symbol, you would think, or it kind of works well?
No, it just depends on how you strike the instrument, how you play it. Yeah.
Cool. Of course, if I'm trying to record all these cymbal sounds, I'm thinking of microphone choices. Now, I know usually it's better to have like condenser microphones to record cymbals, but I don't know if there's any chance maybe.
I'm not an expert on that, so I can't help you. But there are people out there that can help you. But I can't. I can only speak to cymbals. I can't speak to recording techniques and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. No worries.
It's quite interesting. I once had a setup where I had many cymbals and a kind of a recording station that I could access from the same point with a bit of rotation and spend a few months kind of matching microphone cymbals, thinking of it. And my conclusion was that recording is impossible. Because, the actual physical presence that is apparent in the sound of a metal sheet like that, it has the amount of detail, the character that I cannot even hope getting out of the speaker. Obviously, I can shape sound to sound cool coming out of the speaker, but I've just kind of given up on trying to, actually make the identity recording because it's just, and I don't know, maybe it speaks to you as well, because for me, the idea of point source is, it's an invisible underlying assumption for most people.
I've been playing cymbals for so long that, when I play a cymbal and I hear it with my ears and it goes through my eardrums and my brain processes it, and then I hear a recording, and as simple as me taking a recording with my phone with a Zoom mic that plugs in the port here. I enjoy hearing recordings because it actually either confirms or contradicts what I thought that I heard when I hear it in person. Recordings are nice because it it takes away any of the things that you think that you're hearing. Here's the recording of it. And you're like, oh, okay, so that's what the cymbal sounds like.
That's so
I would welcome you to contact Memphis Drum Shop, Drum Center, Portsmouth, New Hampshire. They, there's a lot of, I don't want to sound like I'm leaving anybody else out, but anybody that records cymbals for their website, they're very, very good at it, and ask them what they're using for equipment, because they're very, very accurate to what the cymbal sounds like if you were to play it in person. Very accurate.
actually, no.
So you want to ask them what equipment that they're using and what type of audio interface and stuff like that. I've been playing cymbals for so long, I can take a cymbal off a lathe and play it and know what it's going to sound like in 2 days. It's just something that you're taught to do by doing it over and over when you work at a cymbal company.
Of course.
Yeah. So technically, to answer your question, you can use any cymbal in rock music, but there are certain designs for rock music, so you can hear it in the context of live music. That's why those cymbals were developed more for live music than anything else. A lot of louder drummers, they'll go into the studio to record an album. They might use A customs, which are thinner. Stuff like that, because they're looking to get a certain sound, and then when you're out on the road, what they don't want to do is they don't want to go through cymbals, because they're in a live situation, and it's very energetic and exciting, and then they tend to overplay the cymbal. What do you think? You think that caused that 16-inch K Dark Crash to break? What were you playing? Because that's got a small bell in it.
It does. I think because a lot of my background is indie rock, and sort of nowadays it's more gone into punk rock, sort of more heavier and faster. And I've always used this cymbal on the right side when I'm playing, just as an alternative to make it louder for the ride cymbal. So I did put it under a lot of stress, which is maybe what sort of happened in the long run. Also, I've had that cymbal since I was 14, 15, and now it's 5 years later, and yeah, I think it's just overuse, and then what I'm playing to sort of put it under that stress to make it break. But I mean, part of this, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to record in a live setting instead of a studio. So I'm just able to get a better sound on top of what the guitarists are playing, so you can actually hear the cymbals properly. But I mean, you say that live cymbals, musicians pick live cymbals. Is there like not live cymbals? Maybe like ones for practice?
Well, they're all live cymbals, but their recording setup might be different than their live setup.
Right. So would you say that setup sort of is an important factor to think about?
Yeah. Live setup, and I'm talking about these touring drummers. They don't want to be going through cymbals, because then you have to contact the company or the distributor and try to get a replacement, and it's a pain in the butt to do that. So right, in drummers, I've been playing drums for 46 years, and I have my cymbals, and they're my favorite, and I don't want anything to happen to the cymbal setup that I use all the time, because I've assembled them, and I like how they play together. I know how you feel about that cymbal breaking. I've only cracked one cymbal in my 46 years of playing. I still have one of my first 16-inch crashers that I bought in like 1984. My first cymbal that I bought was an 18-inch rock crash, Soldier rock crash, in 1981, and the stand fell over and got a ding in the edge, and it cracked there. So I didn't crack it from playing it. It started to propagate from that little dent from what it hit the cement floor in my basement.
I mean, what type of music do you play? What genre is?
Oh, I'm a cover band drummer. I play just, kind of top 40 music, and I also play in a rockabilly band.
Nice.
So which is more based in kind of shuffle and swing and stuff like that. So,
That's fair
yep.
enough.
I was thinking of these attributes. So maybe consonance dissonance in terms of the spectrum is also something we can quote in terms of rock applications, right? So
Dissonance to me, that's kind of a negative term. It's almost like tension in the music, or when you play a chord and there's a lot of tension and there's dissonance in there. The thing that I was taught over the years at Zildjian from all the people that came before me, and I got to work with Armin Zildjian and had cymbal tester Leon Chiappini and Lenny DiMuzio and countless amount of artists. They don't want cymbals that are muddy. You want to be able to hear the stick definition when you crash it. You want to hear, a prominent